prove that the Hebrew Israelites were black people in the Bible. And I'm not going to use the verses that talk about Jesus Christ. I'm not going to use the verses that talk about Judah being black unto the ground. I'm not going to use any of those verses that people can try to use to say, well, you're taking that out of context. No, I'm not going to use those verses. I'm going to use clear verses and a clear definition, and I'm going to prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt, nobody's going to be able to deny it after this. Acts chapter 13 and verse 1. It says, now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger. You see that? So it says there were certain prophets and teachers. Now we got to find out where these prophets come from. Who are these prophets? Can anybody in the Bible be a prophet? Let's find that out. Let's go precept upon precept and let's get the answers. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 17. Thus saith the Lord God, art thou he of whom I have spoken in old time by my servants, the prophets of Israel? You see that? It says by my servants, prophets of Israel. So this verse is clear that the Israelites are the ones that are the prophets in the Bible. All right, let's get another verse to even further prove it. Amos chapter 2 and verse 11. And I raised up your sons for prophets and your young men for Nazarites. Is it not even thus, O ye children of Israel? You see that? He said the Israelites are the prophets. The Israelites are the prophets. Nowhere will you read in the Bible that another nation of people was a prophet for the Most High God. It was always the prophets being from Israel. All the prophets were Hebrew Israelites. And I had to establish that. So when we go back to Acts 13, it's going to be clear what these people look like. Acts chapter 13 and verse 1. Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, and we know those prophets come from where? From Israel. It says certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger. You see that? And that word Niger right there, that is a Latin word. Now I know this was translated from the Greek, but that is a Latin word, and we're going to look up and see what does that Latin word mean. So let's go to Google and let's type in the word Negro. This is the word Negro on Google. Now, when you look at this word Negro, you come down to its origin, we already know what the word Negro means. And we already know the people that this word Negro was associated with. All right, this word Negro was associated with so-called black people, indigenous people of America, indigenous people around the world. This word Negro was associated with those people to refer to dark or black skin or black people. All right, now let's go down to the origin of this word Negro. You look at the origin, what does it say? Origin, Latin, Niger. That is the same word we just read in the Bible. That is the same exact word. So the origin of the word Negro is Niger. So now that we know that, let's go over to the Blue Letter Bible and let's go look it up in the Greek and see if the Greek word is saying the exact same thing. You see that? It's clear. Niger means black. You see that? Niger means black. Even when you see down here in the Strong's definition, what does it say? Neeger. That sounds a lot like the offensive N-word, doesn't it? Because that's what it's talking about. That's exactly what it's talking about. This word Niger is referring to black or Negro. So now when you go back and you know all of this history, when you go back to Acts chapter 13 and verse 1 and you read it, now you understand what it's talking about. Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon. It was called what? Negroes. They were called Negroes, black people. That's clear. So if the prophets are Israelites and they were black people, what was Christ? Christ is a direct descendant of all of those prophets. If we're going to do it according to the Bible, right? Christ is a direct descendant of all those prophets, even King David. So what if the prophets were Negroes and they were black people? What color was Christ? It's common sense. Now, I know people are going to go jump to that verse in the Bible where it talks about King Solomon being ruddy. You know, people always like to use that and say, ruddy. See, ruddy, brother, he was ruddy. And they try to use that to deny the fact that these were black people. So let's go to the Zondervan Bible Dictionary and let's get the definition of the word ruddy. It says ruddy, a word used to refer to a red or fair complexion in contrast to the dark skin of the Hebrews. You see that? It says ruddy was used to refer to the red or fair complexion, meaning light-skinned. You ever seen the light-skinned black person? Their skin is a little reddish or ruddy. So that's what they're talking about. That's why it says in contrast to the dark skin of the Hebrews, letting you know the Hebrews had dark skin. They were black people. This is what the scholars are saying. The scholars in the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, the scholars are saying the Hebrews were dark-skinned people. So this is 100% proof that the Hebrew Israelites were black people. So now we're going to read from
Shout
this
out
call From Babylon to Timber.
Y'all boy Parker. Awesome. Y'all. Taught on that 100,000 times.
R. Windsor. It says originally all Hamites and Shemites or Semites were black. Abraham was a black Shemite and a descendant of Shem. The name of Abraham was Abram before he was referred to as Abraham. The three Hebrew patriarchs were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This Jacob begot 12 sons, who later fathered the 12 tribes of Israel. Abraham was a father not only of the Hebrew Israelite nation, but also of the Arab nation. Now, the mother and grandmother of the Arabian nation were black Hamite Egyptian women, and the fathers of the Arabian nation were Abraham and Ishmael, black Shemites. You see that? So everybody knows the history of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, and Jacob. All right? It says, at a certain time, there were hard feelings between Sarah, Abraham's wife, and Hagar, Sarah's maidservant. So Hagar fled from Abraham's house and dwelt in the wilderness. Josephus, the Jewish historian, wrote that Ishmael married an Egyptian woman. As a result, he begat 12 sons: Nabajoth, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Dumah, Massa, Hadar, Tema, Jertu, Napish, and Kadima. These 12 sons became the 12 tribes and inhabited the region from the Euphrates to the Red Sea in the Arabian Peninsula. This country is known today as Arabia. To those who do not believe that the ancient Arabians were black, I would like to make one point crystal clear. If your mother and grandmother were black, I am positive that you would have many colored features. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 tribes of Israel were all black people. This I shall prove to you by a gradual method. The parts of the earth inhabited by the children of Shem were parts of the territory of Assyria and Elam, Persia, east of the Tigris River, the eastern part of Syria, and the parts of the Arabian Peninsula. All the children of Shem were black. This position will be supported by arguments and facts later. The second classification of mankind was the Hamites, who controlled the great centers of civilization in ancient times, 4000 BC, soon after the flood. This civilization included the continent of Africa, the land of Canaan, Israel, parts of Arabia, Syria, Phoenicia, Turkey, Babylonia, southern Persia, Iran, East Pakistan, and a large part of India. When the king Pharaoh of Egypt promulgated an edict to cast all the Hebrew male babies into the Nile River, Miriam and her mother hid the baby Moses in a basket alongside the river. Meanwhile, Pharaoh's daughter came to the Nile to wash herself, and she saw the basket and the baby, Moses. Pharaoh's daughter knew that the baby was a Hebrew, and she adopted him. If Moses had been a white baby, it would have been difficult to conceal him from her father's anger. In the period of Moses, the black Egyptians enslaved black Jews. Another point to prove that the Jews were black is the leprosy laws written in the 13th chapter of Leviticus and explained in the 2nd chapter of this book. The strangest and most amazing phenomenon concerning biblical leprosy was that the skin turned white. These laws of leprosy were given to the nation of Israel, and they could not apply to a white nation. Herbert Went wrote in his book, It Began in Babel, all indications point to the fact that Asia was the cradle of the black race. You see that? So all throughout the scriptures and all throughout history, we can prove that the people of the Bible were black people. Now we're going to read from this book called America, being the latest and most accurate description of the New World. And our people love bringing out this book, but they love to skip this part right here. The Portuguese that dwelt on this island informed the Netherlanders that few lived above 50 years there, yet notwithstanding the great gain tempted them to tarry, several of them having 200 or 300 Negroes that worked in the sugar mills. You see that? It says 200 or 300 Negroes. Now it called them Negroes right here, but as we read down, it's going to call them something else. It says that John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before, whom thou the unwholesome air destroyed. Yet the place was not left desolate or destroyed, for he sent new inhabitants, who first settled in Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas, that so they might be better used to the air, that the said king sold all those Jews or slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion. You see that? He said he sold all those Jews. Now up top, it said they were Negroes. At the bottom, it said they were Jews. So this proves not just within the scriptures, also within history, that the people of the Bible were black people. Bottom line.